people did something, said a freshman congresswoman from Minnesota, to support and justify the creation of CARE. Today I am here to respond to you exactly who did what to whom. Madam, objectively speaking, we know who and what was done. There is no uncertainty about that. Why your confusion? On that day, 19 Islamic terrorists, members of Al-Qaeda, killed over 3,000 people and caused billions of dollars of economic damage. Is that clear? But as to whom? I was attacked. Your relatives and friends were attacked. Our constitutional freedoms were attacked. And our nation's founding on Judeo-Christian principles were attacked. That's what some people did. Got that now?
After the tragic events of September 11th, 2001, the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE, rose to prominence as a voice for Muslim Americans navigating an era of fear, grief, and suspicion. The nation's heartbreak had turned into anxiety, and for countless innocent citizens, that meant enduring misplaced blame, scrutiny, and discrimination. CARE's rise reflected a collective resolve to defend civil liberties at a time when the line between national security and personal freedom grew dangerously thin. Years later, Representative Ilhan Omar's now infamous remark, "Some people did something," reignited those old wounds. Though her intent was to describe the perpetrator's actions, her phrasing was heard by many as a dismissal of the pain, loss, and sacrifice that defined that dark September morning. The backlash was immediate, polarizing, and deeply emotional, a clash between empathy and expression, memory and meaning.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 2A.1 of Rule 9, I seek recognition to give notice of my intent to raise a question of the privileges of the House. The form of the resolution is as follows.
Recognized.
Censuring Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. Whereas elected members of Congress take an oath to bear true faith and allegiance to the United States without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. Whereas Representative Ilhan Omar took an oath of allegiance to the United States upon becoming a citizen, declaring, "I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen."
The congressional response that followed aimed to leave no room for confusion, to reclaim the truth of what happened on September 11th. The Speaker rose with unwavering conviction, reminding the chamber, and the country watching beyond its walls, that this tragedy was neither vague nor misunderstood. 19 Islamic extremists, members of Al-Qaeda, hijacked 4 planes and murdered over 3,000 innocent men, women, and children in cold blood. Their mission wasn't just to end lives. It was to break the spirit of a free and fearless nation. Each word carried the weight of remembrance. The Speaker emphasized that those attacks weren't only about destruction. They were a direct assault on the principles that shape America's moral core: liberty, faith, and the sacred rights enshrined in the Constitution. The tone grew heavier with every sentence, echoing the grief and defiance of a people who refused to let terror redefine their identity. This, the Speaker declared, was not merely an attack on buildings or symbols of power. It was an assault on the essence of American belief itself, on Judeo-Christian values.
As on January 27, 2024, Representative Omar gave remarks at an event in Minneapolis in which she made treasonous statements. Whereas Representative Omar said she has spoken to many Somalians who asked her to intercede for the Somali government by pressuring the United States government into certain actions. Whereas Representative Omar assured the Somalians she spoke to, the U.S. government will only do what Somalians in the U.S. tell them to do. They will do what we want and nothing else. They must follow our orders, and that is how we will safeguard the interest of Somalia. Whereas Representative Omar continued, "For as long as I am in U.S. Congress, Somalia will never be in danger. Its waters will not be stolen by Ethiopia or others.
On the floor of the United States House of Representatives, the air was thick with unease. Tension rippled through the chamber as a congresswoman from Georgia stood to introduce a resolution, one aimed squarely at censuring Representative Ilhan Omar. The Speaker, maintaining procedural formality, recognized her under Rule 9, granting the right to present a privileged question, a matter not of politics, but of the House's own honor. The sudden stillness was striking. Every eye turned toward the podium as she began to speak, her voice steady, deliberate, and unflinching. Each word landed with purpose, carrying not just political intent, but moral gravity. She reminded the chamber that every member standing in that room had sworn an oath, not to a party or ideology, not to public favor or international sentiment, but to the Constitution of the United States. That oath, she said, was not a mere tradition recited for ceremony, but a sacred bond, one that demands true faith and allegiance to the Republic and its founders.
Sleep in comfort knowing I am here to protect the interest of Somalia from inside the U.S. system. Whereas George Washington warned in his farewell address of 1796 to guard against the impostures of pretended patriotism, and further declared citizens by birth or choice of a common country, that country has a right to concentrate your affections. The name of American, which belongs to you in your national capacity, must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than any appellation derived from local discrimination.
The resolution then shifted from preamble to accusation, its tone growing sharper with each line. It formally outlined the allegations against Representative Ilhan Omar, marking a clear turning point in the chamber's energy. According to the document, Omar had delivered a speech in Minneapolis on January 27, 2024, a speech that, if accurately quoted, raised unsettling questions about allegiance, influence, and the boundaries of representation. The text claimed that Omar had pledged before members of the Somali community to use her congressional position to pressure the U.S. government into adopting policies favorable to Somalia. One line in particular ignited the chamber's tension. She was quoted as saying that the U.S. government would act in accordance with the wishes of Somali Americans. To many, that statement suggested the possibility of foreign interests shaping American policy through domestic political channels. The resolution went further, citing her alleged promise to defend Somalia's territorial rights, including its waters, from being stolen, and to do so from within the very halls of American power. Together, these claims painted a picture of divided loyalty, a challenge not.
Whereas these statements by Representative Omar clearly violate the oath she took as an elected member of Congress to defend and protect the United States Constitution. Whereas Representative Omar has exhibited the treasonous tendencies George Washington warned about, and her actions must be condemned by all members of Congress who adhere to the oath they took upon assuming office. And whereas by openly admitting her efforts to advance Somalia's interests,
the final section of the resolution carried the unmistakable gravity of history. It reached back to the very foundation of the Republic, invoking George Washington's 1796 farewell address, his solemn warning against the impostures of pretended patriotism. That quote, more than 2 centuries old, landed like a verdict from the founders themselves. It was a reminder that loyalty to the United States must never bend to personal ambition, political faction, or foreign allegiance. This was not mere rhetoric. It was the heartbeat of American principle. The resolution reaffirmed that citizenship, whether by birthright or by choice, binds every individual to a single, unshakable duty: to put America first. In that light, Representative Omar's alleged statements were framed as more than controversial remarks. They were cast as a breach of the sacred trust that anchors representative government itself. The closing paragraphs left no ambiguity. The House would move to formally censure her, a rare, solemn act reserved for moments when words strike at the core of national integrity. It called for Omar to stand publicly in the well of the chamber as the Speaker read the rebuke aloud, a symbolic act of accountability before the American people.
using her position As a United States representative, Representative Omar has revealed herself to be a foreign agent acting on behalf of a foreign government. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota be censured. Representative Ilhan Omar forthwith present herself in the well of the House of Representatives.
The resolution drove home a defining truth, that loyalty to the United States is not a suggestion, but the very cornerstone of public service. It reminded every member in that chamber that the oath of office is not a ritual or formality. It is a moral and legal covenant, a sacred pledge to defend the Constitution with unshakable fidelity. Within that framework, the text accused Representative Ilhan Omar of violating that trust, of allowing her allegiance to fracture, and in doing so, placing the interests of another nation within the walls of American governance itself. The speaker's tone grew heavy, deliberate, almost judicial. This was not a moment of politics, but of principle. He warned that if such conduct were permitted to stand unchallenged, it would set a perilous precedent, one that invited future leaders to act as agents of foreign powers while cloaked in the protections of American democracy. Such a path, he declared, would erode the very concept of national sovereignty, turning the people's house into a vessel for divided loyalties. To anchor its warning in history, the resolution turned to George Washington's farewell address of 1796.
Representative Ilhan Omar be censured with the public reading of this resolution
Those
by the
words,
Speaker,
drawn from the Republic's first
Representative
guardian, reverberated through the
Ilhan Omar
chamber
be
like a moral
and is
echo.
hereby removed
Washington's
from the
warning
Committee of
stood
the
as both
Budget
prophecy
and the
and
Committee on
principle.
Education
That
and
divided
the
loyalty, born of foreign attachment, is not just a political misstep. It is a quiet but fatal wound to the unity and survival of the Republic itself.
CARE was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil.
The reader emphasized Washington's enduring counsel that the name American must rise above all lesser distinctions of region, religion, or heritage. It was a principle born from the crucible of revolution, meant to bind a diverse people into one nation under a single flag. The resolution argued that this ideal was not merely aspirational but foundational, the glue that had held the Republic together through civil war, economic despair, and ideological divide. By invoking Washington's farewell address, the authors grounded their case, not in modern party rhetoric, but in the very philosophy that gave birth to the American experiment, that unity of loyalty is the lifeblood of liberty. The citation of Washington's words gave the chamber an almost sacred stillness. What had begun as a procedural reading transformed into a moral reckoning, a moment that demanded every lawmaker weigh comfort against conviction. The question was no longer about Representative Omar alone, but about the House itself. Would it tolerate divided allegiance under the guise of representation, or would it reaffirm that devotion to country is the first and final duty of public trust? The resolution's conclusion struck with precision. It did not request debate, it called for consequence. Representative Omar, it decreed, must be formally censured by the House and made to stand in the well of the chamber as the Speaker read the rebuke aloud. That moment, public, solemn, and inescapable, was designed to serve not as punishment, but as principle. It would remind the nation, in full view, that no office, no ideology, and no allegiance beyond America stands above the oath sworn to its Constitution. School. It concluded by declaring that such devotion is not optional, but foundational, the invisible oath that sustains the Republic beyond law and politics. The final words carried the tone of a moral covenant, insisting that the House of Representatives must remain a place where allegiance to America is absolute and unquestioned. By urging Representative Omar's removal from key committees, the resolution sought not vengeance but restoration, a return to the ethical boundaries that defined the dignity of public service. When the Speaker set down the text, silence filled the chamber. Every member felt the gravity of what had been read, not merely a censure, but a collective stand to safeguard the moral spine of American governance. The echoes of faith, freedom, and responsibility lingered, transforming procedure into reflection. Patriotism, the document affirmed, is not a weapon but a safeguard, preserving the integrity of the Republic by ensuring that no voice in power can distort the nation's purpose without consequence. Public trust, it warned, once broken, can only be restored through visible acts of accountability. The censure, then, was not about one lawmaker alone. It was about renewing the covenant between the people and their government. The stillness that followed spoke louder than debate. Representatives on both sides of the aisle understood they had witnessed something larger than politics, a reaffirmation of the conscience that keeps democracy upright. History, it seemed, would not record this moment for its division, but for its clarity. Patriotism, it concluded, is measured not in words, but in the weight of responsibility. Those entrusted with America's voice must speak with honor, act with integrity, and serve with undivided loyalty. The censure stood as both judgment and renewal, proof that freedom endures only when guarded by principle. As the gavel struck, the chamber exhaled. The portraits on the walls, the flag above, and the silence that followed all seemed to bear witness. The moment would pass, but its meaning would remain, a reminder that the Republic, though often tested, still remembers who it is, what it stands for, and why its ideals are worth defending at any cost.